The celebration at Earth's orbital shipyard felt different this time. Captain Dongmin Lee watched through the viewing port as engineers and technicians moved around the newly completed vessel, like ants around their queen. The ship looked ordinary, enough from the outside. Sleek black hull, standard weapon mounts, nothing that would make an enemy fleet take notice. That was exactly the point. Captain Lee, report to Briefing Room 7 immediately, came the announcement over the intercom. Dongmin straightened his uniform and made his way through the crowded corridors. 3 years of war against the hegemony empire had taught humanity many hard lessons. The aliens were stronger, faster, and had technology that made human weapons look like toys. Every battle had been a desperate struggle just to survive. The briefing room held only 5 people when Dongmin entered. Admiral Chen sat at the head of the table, her weathered face showing every one of her 60 years. To her right sat Chief Engineer Subin Park, a woman barely 30, but already considered one of the brightest minds in the Terran Defense Coalition. The others were high-ranking officials whose faces Dongmin recognized but whose names he had forgotten. "Captain, please sit," Admiral Chen said, gesturing to the chair across from her. "What you're about to hear cannot leave this room. The future of humanity depends on absolute secrecy." Dongmin nodded and took his seat. He had heard similar words before, but something in the Admiral's tone made this feel different. More important, more dangerous. "The ship you saw outside isn't what it appears to be," Subin said, activating a holographic display above the table. The image showed the vessel in cross-section, revealing internal structures that made Dongmin's eyes widen. "We call her the TDC Vanguard, and she's about to change everything." The interior of the ship was unlike anything Dongmin had ever seen. Where a normal vessel would have massive fusion reactors, the Vanguard had something that pulsed with strange energy. Conduits ran through the walls in patterns that seemed to bend space around them. The weapon systems connected to power sources that should have been impossible. "What am I looking at?" Dongmin asked, though part of him already suspected. The answer would be beyond his understanding. "Quantum phase technology," Subin replied, her voice filled with quiet pride. "For the past 5 years, a team of our best scientists has been working on something the hegemony empire thinks is impossible. We've learned to manipulate space-time itself." Admiral Chen leaned forward. "The aliens think they're fighting primitive humans with basic fusion drives and chemical explosives. They have no idea we've moved beyond conventional physics." The hologram shifted to show the ship's reactor core. It didn't look like any power source Dongmin had seen. Instead of the familiar sphere of a fusion reactor, this was a complex geometric shape that seemed to exist in more dimensions than should be possible. Energy flowed through it in ways that hurt to look at directly. "The quantum phase reactor doesn't just create power," Subin explained. "It allows us to step partially outside normal space. We can phase through solid matter, manipulate time flow, and channel energy levels that would power entire colonies into focused applications." "That's impossible," Dongmin said automatically, then felt foolish for saying it. If it were impossible, they wouldn't be sitting here discussing it. "The hegemony empire has conquered 17 different species across 3 galactic arms," Admiral Chen said. "Each time they won through overwhelming force, their fleets number in the thousands. Their individual ships can destroy planets. They've never faced anything that could match their raw power." "Until now," added one of the officials Dongmin didn't recognize. Subin manipulated the hologram to show the ship's weapon systems. "We don't need to match their firepower. We can attack through time itself. Their shields can't stop weapons that arrive before they're fired. Their armor means nothing against temporal acceleration that ages it to dust in seconds." The implications began to sink into Dongmin's mind. This wasn't just a new ship. It was a complete revolution in warfare. "How many people know about this?" "Including you, fewer than 50, Admiral Chen replied. "The construction crews think they built an experimental stealth vessel. The reactor team believes they were working on an advanced power source for space stations. Only the people in this room know the complete truth." Dongmin stared at the hologram, trying to process what he was seeing. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you're going to command her," Subin said with a slight smile. Your record in the Rigel campaign and the defense of Mars made you the obvious choice. You think differently than most commanders. You see possibilities where others see only problems. The Vanguard has a crew of 127, Admiral Chen continued. Each person was selected not just for their skills, but for their ability to keep secrets and follow orders without question. They know they're part of something special, but they don't know just how special. The meeting continued for another hour, as Subin walked Dongmin through the ship's capabilities. The phase drive could make the vessel untouchable by conventional weapons. The temporal distortion fields could trap enemy ships in bubbles of slowed time. The quantum torpedoes could age targets to destruction in seconds. Most incredibly, the ship could exist in multiple locations simultaneously by creating temporal echoes of itself. When do we begin testing? Dongmin asked. Testing is complete, Admiral Chen replied. We've run every simulation possible without risking discovery. The Hegemony Empire is massing their full fleet at the edge of our solar system. They're preparing for what they believe will be humanity's final defeat. Instead, they're about to witness something that will change galactic politics forever, Subin added. We're not just introducing a new weapon. We're fundamentally altering the nature of warfare itself. As the briefing concluded, Dongmin was handed a secure data pad containing his orders and the technical specifications he would need to command the Vanguard. The weight of responsibility settled on his shoulders like a heavy cloak. In his hands was not just the future of humanity, but the future of every species that had suffered under hegemony oppression. One more thing, Captain, Admiral Chen said, as the others began to leave. The quantum phase technology isn't just a weapon. It's a gift we intend to share with every species in the galaxy once we've proven its effectiveness. The Hegemony Empire rules through fear and overwhelming force. We're about to show the galaxy that there's another way. Dongmin looked out the window at the Vanguard one more time. From the outside, she still looked like just another human warship. But now he knew better. She was humanity's declaration that the age of hegemony dominance was coming to an end. The question was whether the aliens would be smart enough to surrender when they realized what they were facing. As he made his way to the docking bay to board his new command, Dongmin couldn't help but smile. The Hegemony Empire had spent decades conquering the galaxy through brute force. They were about to learn that sometimes intelligence trumped strength. Sometimes innovation defeated numbers. Sometimes a single ship could change everything. The Hegemony fleet arrived at the edge of Earth's solar system like a plague of metal locusts. 3,000 ships of various sizes spread across space in a formation that could be seen from Earth's surface with basic telescopes. Supreme Admiral Keth stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dominion's Wrath, watching the small blue planet through the main view screen. His four arms moved independently as he reviewed tactical displays, his insectoid features showing satisfaction at the terror his fleet must be causing. The humans are broadcasting surrender requests on all frequencies, reported his communications officer, a thin creature with gray skin and too many eyes. They're begging for mercy. Keth's mandibles clicked in amusement. Of course they are. They can see what we brought. 3,000 vessels against their pathetic 100-ship defense fleet. He gestured with two of his arms toward the tactical display. Every species breaks at this point. The sight of overwhelming force crushes their will to fight. The Admiral had used the same strategy 17 times before. Show up with impossible numbers, demand surrender, then crush any resistance so thoroughly that the survivors would never think of rebellion. It had worked on species far more advanced than these primitive humans. Their fusion drives were centuries behind hegemony technology. Their weapons couldn't even penetrate basic hegemony shielding. Sir, we're receiving a transmission from Earth. Defense Command, the communications officer announced. They're requesting a negotiation meeting. Already? Keth seemed surprised. Most species at least pretended to consider fighting back. Very well. Tell them they have 1 hour to send a representative to discuss terms of surrender, and make sure they understand. Unconditional surrender is the only option. On Earth, the transmission reached Admiral Chen at the same time. Similar messages reached every major government on the planet. The terms were simple and brutal, complete. Surrender within 72 hours, or the planet would be reduced to ash. It was the same ultimatum the hegemony had delivered to 17 other species. None had refused. "They're following the pattern exactly," Admiral Chen told the emergency council gathered in the secure bunker beneath Geneva. "Overwhelming show of force, impossible demands, then destruction of anyone who resists. Our defense fleet can't stop them," General Morrison said, his face pale as he reviewed the tactical reports. 3,000 ships against our 100. Even if we had perfect tactics and incredible luck, we couldn't win. "Which is why we're not sending the defense fleet," Admiral Chen replied calmly. "We're sending the Vanguard." The silence in the room was deafening. President Martinez was the first to speak. "One ship against 3,000? Admiral, I respect your confidence in new technology, but this seems like suicide." "It would be, if we were planning to fight conventionally," Chen replied. "But we're not planning to fight at all. We're planning to demonstrate." Aboard the Vanguard, Captain Dongmin Li reviewed his orders one final time. The mission parameters were unlike anything in military history. Take one experimental ship against the largest fleet ever assembled in human space. Show the aliens something that would make them reconsider their understanding of physics itself. Do it all in less than 15 minutes. "Captain, all systems are green," reported Chief Engineer Subin Park from her station. "Quantum phase reactor is stable and ready for full activation. Temporal weapons are charged and standing by." Navigation Officer Tae-ho Kim looked up from his displays. "Course plotted to the hegemony fleet's position. We can be there in 30 minutes at conventional speeds. Or we can be there in 3 minutes using phase drive," Subin added quietly. "But that would reveal our capabilities too early." Dongmin nodded. The plan required perfect timing. Arrive conventionally like any normal human ship would. Let the aliens see exactly what they thought they were facing. One small vessel against impossible odds. Only then would they reveal the truth. "Take us out, standard fusion drive," Dongmin ordered. "Let's give them what they expect to see." Protocol. Vanguard departed Earth orbit looking like any other human warship heading to its doom. No special effects. No impressive displays of power. Just another desperate attempt by an inferior species to avoid annihilation. The hegemony fleet watched their approach with casual interest, the way a human might watch an ant wandering toward a campfire. "Human vessel, you are approaching a restricted area," came the transmission from Admiral Keth's flagship. "State your business immediately." "This is Captain Dongmin Li of the Terran Defense Coalition ship Vanguard," Dongmin replied, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was about to attempt. "I'm here to discuss terms." Keth's image appeared on the main screen, his alien features twisted into what might have been amusement. "Terms? You're in no position to discuss terms, human. You have one ship. We have 3,000. You have primitive weapons that can't scratch our shielding. We have planet killers." "I can see that," Dongmin replied calmly. "Very impressive. However, I have a counter-proposal." The alien admiral's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of either amusement or anger. Dongmin couldn't tell which. "A counter-proposal? You amuse me, human. Very well, let's hear your desperate offer." "You have 14 minutes to withdraw your fleet from the system and return to hegemony space," Dongmin said, his voice carrying absolute certainty. "After that, I cannot guarantee your safety." The transmission channel filled with sounds that must have been hegemony laughter, not just from Keth, but from others on his bridge. The idea that one human ship could threaten their massive fleet was apparently hilarious to them. 14 minutes, Keth managed to say between his clicking sounds. "What exactly do you think you can accomplish in 14 minutes, human?" "I think I can convince you that continuing this invasion would be a mistake," Dongmin replied. "A very costly mistake." Around the Vanguard, 3,000 alien ships began moving into attack formation. Energy weapons powered up, missile tubes loaded, fighter craft launched from carrier bays. The preparation for battle was visible even to the human ship's basic sensors. Any normal vessel would have been destroyed instantly by even a fraction of that firepower. Your confidence is either admirable or insane, Keth said, his forearms gesturing toward his tactical displays. Perhaps both. Very well, human. You have amused me enough. Prepare to witness the power of the Hegemony Empire. On the Vanguard's bridge, Subin looked up from her engineering console. Captain, quantum phase reactor is ready for full activation. All temporal systems are online. We can begin the demonstration at your order. Tejo checked his navigation displays one more time. Enemy fleet is in optimal position, sir. They've arranged themselves in a classic intimidation formation. Maximum visibility, concentrated firepower. Perfect, Dongmin replied. They've given us exactly what we need. He activated the ship's general communication system, broadcasting, to every vessel in the Hegemony fleet. This is Captain Lee of the TDC Vanguard. You now have 13 minutes and 45 seconds to begin your withdrawal. What happens next is your choice. Admiral Keth's image flickered with static as he leaned forward on his command chair. Enough games, human. You die now. He turned to his weapons officer. All ships open fire. Show these primitives what happens to species that refuse hegemony authority. The space around the Vanguard lit up with energy beams, plasma missiles, and exotic weapons that had destroyed entire worlds. Enough firepower to crack a planet's crust streaked toward the small human ship. Any conventional vessel would have been vaporized instantly. Instead, something impossible happened. Phase drive engaged, Subin announced calmly. Beginning temporal acceleration sequence. The Vanguard shifted slightly out of normal space-time, and 3,000 weapons fired at empty space. Every beam, every missile, every exotic energy blast passed harmlessly through the area where the human ship had been a moment before. To hegemony sensors, the vessel had simply stopped existing while remaining perfectly visible to their cameras. Admiral Keth stared at his displays in confusion. His weapons officer reported that all systems were functioning normally. His sensors confirmed that every weapon had hit the target zone, but the human ship was still there, undamaged and apparently unconcerned. 12 minutes, came Dongmin's voice over the communication channel. I recommend you use them wisely. Admiral Keth stared at his tactical displays with growing confusion. Every sensor confirmed that his fleet's weapons had functioned perfectly. Every targeting system showed direct hits on the human vessel. Yet the small ship remained exactly where it had been, showing no damage whatsoever. His weapons officer, a seasoned veteran of 12 planetary conquests, looked equally baffled. Sir, all weapons struck the target zone, the officer reported, his voice uncertain for the first time in years. Energy readings show perfect impact, but the human ship shows no damage signatures. Run diagnostics on all systems, Keth ordered, his mandibles clicking with irritation. There must be some malfunction. On the Vanguard's bridge, Captain Dongmin watched the alien fleet's confusion with calm satisfaction. The phase drive had worked exactly as Subin had promised. Their ship existed slightly outside normal space-time, allowing conventional attacks to pass through them like light through glass. 11 minutes remaining, Communications Officer Ji Young Nam announced to the Hegemony fleet. Her voice carried the same professional calm as if she were reporting the weather. Temporal weaponry test will begin in 30 seconds. Subin looked up from her engineering station. Captain, quantum phase reactor is at full power. Temporal distortion field is stable. Target selected, their largest dreadnought. Through the main view screen, Dongmin could see the massive hegemony vessel Subin had chosen. The ship was over, a mile long, bristling with weapons that could destroy continents. Its armor was thick enough to withstand direct hits from fusion bombs. According to intelligence reports, similar vessels had single-handedly conquered entire star systems. Begin demonstration, Dongmin ordered quietly. The Vanguard moved in a way that violated every law of physics the hegemony understood. Instead of accelerating normally through space, it simply appeared directly above the massive dreadnought, as if it had stepped from one location to another, without crossing the distance between. Impossible, whispered Keth's science officer. A creature whose species had mastered faster than light travel before humans had discovered fire. No technology can achieve instantaneous displacement without exotic matter conduits. The human ship released what appeared to be a small energy pulse toward the dreadnought below. No massive explosion, no spectacular light show, just a gentle wave of energy that washed over the alien vessel like a soft breeze. Then the impossible began. The mile-long warship started to age. Its hull, which had been polished black metal moments before, began to show corrosion. Centuries of wear appeared in seconds. The ship's massive weapon systems rusted and crumbled. Its energy shields flickered and failed as the generators that powered them decayed beyond function. "What's happening to the conquest of worlds?" Keth demanded, naming the dreadnought that was dissolving before their eyes. His science officer's voice trembled as she replied, "Sir, the human weapon appears to be accelerating time around the target vessel. The ship is experiencing rapid temporal aging. Thousands of years of entropy are occurring in seconds." The mighty dreadnought that had terrorized a dozen species crumbled to space dust in less than 30 seconds. A billion-credit warship with enough firepower to glass planets reduced to floating debris by a weapon that attacked through time itself. "Temporal weaponry test successful," Ji-young announced to the stunned hegemony fleet. 10 minutes remaining. Admiral Keth felt something he had never experienced in his 40 years of military service: genuine fear. This wasn't just superior technology. This was something that transcended every understanding of warfare his species possessed. How do you fight an enemy that can step outside time itself? "All ships concentrate fire on the human vessel," he ordered, desperation creeping into his voice. "Everything we have. Now." 3,000 ships opened fire simultaneously. The combined firepower could have shattered moons. Energy beams that had never failed to destroy their targets. Missiles with warheads that burned at stellar temperatures. Exotic weapons that could tear apart atomic bonds themselves. All of it passed harmlessly through the Vanguard as the ship remained phased out of normal space-time. The human vessel appeared completely unconcerned by the greatest display of military might the galaxy had ever seen. "Phase torpedoes armed and ready," reported Tactical Officer Johann Shin from his station. "Multiple targets acquired." "Fire at a will," Dongmin replied. What happened next shattered every concept of space warfare the hegemony had developed over centuries of conquest. The Vanguard began launching weapons that seemed to arrive at their targets before they were fired. Hegemony ships exploded as quantum torpedoes struck them in the past, creating temporal paradoxes that their sensors couldn't even register properly. Some of the alien vessels tried to escape, engaging their fastest drives to flee the impossible human ship. It didn't matter. The Vanguard began existing in multiple locations simultaneously, temporal echoes of itself appearing throughout the battlefield. Each echo was real, each one capable of devastating attacks. "Sir, the human ship is now showing on sensors in 47 different locations," Keth's tactical officer reported, his voice breaking with panic. "Each reading shows a full-powered vessel. How is this possible?" The answer came from Subin's engineering expertise, though the aliens couldn't hear her explanation to the Vanguard's crew. "We're creating stable temporal echoes by splitting our timeline at quantum decision points. Each version of the ship is equally real until the timelines converge again." A squadron of hegemony fighters attempted a desperate attack run, hoping their speed and numbers might overwhelm the human defenses. The Vanguard responded by doing something that made Admiral Keith's science officer faint at her station. The human ship reversed the local time stream around the attacking fighters. The alien pilots found themselves flying backwards, their thoughts reversing, their very existence unwinding. One by one, they simply ceased to have ever been in that location, their presence erased from the immediate timeline. 8 minutes remaining, Ji-young announced with the same professional calm she might use to announce lunch break. Quantum phase demonstration continuing. The Vanguard materialized inside a hegemony cruiser, its matter briefly occupying the same space as the alien ship. The result was catastrophic. The cruiser exploded from within as two objects tried to exist in the same location, creating an energy release that destroyed 3 nearby vessels as well. Another group of alien ships found themselves trapped in temporal bubbles frozen in time like insects in amber. They could see the battle continuing around them, but they were locked in slowed time, watching helplessly as their fleet was systematically dismantled by technologies that shouldn't exist. "Sir, we've lost over 600 ships," Keth's tactical officer reported. "Our weapons cannot touch them, our defenses cannot stop them, our fastest ships cannot escape them." Admiral Keth stared at the tactical display showing his once mighty fleet being carved apart by a single human vessel. Ships that had conquered worlds were being destroyed by weapons that attacked through time itself. Crews that had never known defeat were being erased from existence by temporal manipulation beyond their understanding. "What are they?" he whispered, more to himself than to his bridge crew. As if in answer to his question, Captain Dongmin's voice came over the communications channel. "We are the species you thought were primitive. We are the people you came to conquer. We are humanity, and we are done being afraid." The Vanguard phased through a formation of 12 hegemony destroyers, each ship exploding as the human vessel's exotic matter briefly shared their space. The demonstration was becoming less about combat and more about showing the complete futility of conventional warfare against temporal technology. 6 minutes remaining, Ji Young announced. "Recommend immediate withdrawal to avoid further losses." For the first time in hegemony military history, Supreme Admiral Keth found himself considering retreat not from a superior force, but from a completely different kind of warfare that made his entire fleet obsolete. The hegemony fleet scattered like startled fish as Admiral Keth finally abandoned all pretense of organized attack. His orders echoed across 3,000 ships: disperse, evade, survive. The mighty formation that had terrorized 17 species broke apart as individual captains tried desperately to escape the impossible human vessel. It made no difference. The Vanguard began moving through the dispersing fleet like death itself. Captain Dongmin watched his tactical displays as Johann marked targets throughout the spreading formation. The ship didn't pursue the fleeing aliens in any conventional sense. Instead, it simply appeared wherever it needed to be, stepping through space-time as easily as walking through doorways. "Temporal cascade weapons ready," Subin reported from her engineering station. "We can demonstrate large area effects whenever you give the order, Captain." 5 minutes remaining, Ji Young announced to the scattering fleet. "Escalation of demonstration beginning now." What happened next went beyond warfare into the realm of cosmic horror for the alien crews. The Vanguard targeted a cluster of 30 hegemony ships that had grouped together for mutual defense. Instead of attacking them individually, it created a temporal cascade, a ripple in spacetime that spread outward like a wave. The first ship caught in the cascade aged rapidly, just as the Dreadnought had earlier. But this time, the temporal effect jumped to the next vessel, then the next, creating a chain reaction of accelerated entropy. Within seconds, 30 warships experienced centuries of decay, their hulls crumbling, their systems failing, their crews aging to dust inside, their collapsing vessels. "Impossible," Keth's science officer whispered from where she had recovered her senses. "They're weaponizing causality itself." Admiral Keth stared at the expanding cloud of debris that had been 30 of his best ships moments before. "How do we fight something like this? How do you defeat an enemy that can attack through time?" The answer was simple and terrifying. You didn't. The Vanguard was demonstrating technologies that made conventional military thinking obsolete. It wasn't just winning the battle. It was revealing that the very concept of battle as the hegemony understood it was meaningless against temporal warfare. A group of hegemony-heavy cruisers attempted to use their most powerful shields to create a defensive formation. Their energy barriers could stop anything in the known galaxy: fusion bombs, antimatter torpedoes, even exotic particle beams. Against conventional weapons, they were invulnerable. The human ship's response was to fire quantum phase torpedoes that arrived at their targets 3 seconds before they were launched. The cruiser's sensors detected the incoming weapons after they had already exploded, creating a temporal paradox that their defensive systems couldn't process. The ships destroyed themselves trying to defend against attacks that had already happened. "This is insane," one of Keth's subordinates gasped as he watched the tactical display. "They're violating every law of physics. Time doesn't work that way." "Apparently it does for humans," Keth replied grimly. and we never saw it coming. The Vanguard's next demonstration pushed even deeper into impossible territory. A squadron of hegemony fighters tried to attack from multiple directions simultaneously, hoping to overwhelm the human ship's defenses through sheer numbers and complex tactics. The human vessel responded by creating dozens of temporal echoes, each one existing at a slightly different point in time, but all occupying the same battle space. To the attacking fighters, it appeared that they were facing an entire fleet of identical ships, each one perfectly coordinated with all the others. The fighter squadron found themselves caught in a temporal crossfire as multiple versions of the Vanguard attacked them from different timeline branches. Pilots experienced the disorienting sensation of being destroyed by the same ship several times simultaneously, as multiple temporal echoes targeted them in parallel timelines. 4 minutes remaining, Ji Young announced. Recommend immediate surrender to minimize further casualties. But the demonstration wasn't finished. Subin had prepared something that would fundamentally alter every species' understanding of warfare. Captain, ready to deploy temporal isolation fields. We can demonstrate complete battlefield control. Dongmin nodded. Proceed. The Vanguard released a series of energy pulses that created bubbles of altered time throughout the battle zone. Some areas experienced accelerated time, where seconds passed like hours for anyone caught inside. Others slowed time to a crawl, trapping ships in temporal amber where they could think and see but not act. Most disturbing of all, some areas experienced reversed time. Hegemony ships caught in these fields found their last few minutes playing backwards, weapons unfiring, orders being unspoken, decisions being unmade. Crews experienced the psychological horror of thinking in reverse while watching their actions undo themselves. We're not fighting them, one of Keth's bridge officers said in a voice hollow with shock. They're playing with us. This isn't warfare. It's a demonstration of godlike power. The human ship proved the point by materializing directly in the center of a tight formation of hegemony vessels. Instead of causing the catastrophic matter-energy explosion that should have resulted, the Vanguard existed in a slightly different phase of reality. The alien ships found their weapons, communications, and life support systems aging rapidly as temporal radiation leaked from the human vessel. Within minutes, 12 state-of-the-art hegemony warships were reduced to floating hulks, their crews evacuating in escape pods as their ships decayed around them. The human vessel phased back to normal space, completely undamaged by an experience that should have destroyed it. 3 minutes remaining. Ji Young's voice carried across the scattered remains of what had once been the most powerful fleet in galactic history. Final demonstration phase beginning. Admiral Keth realized with growing horror that the humans weren't just showing off superior weapons. They were systematically demonstrating that every aspect of hegemony military doctrine was obsolete. Their shields couldn't stop temporal weapons. Their speed meant nothing against ships that could step through space-time. Their numbers were irrelevant against an enemy that could exist in multiple timelines simultaneously. The final demonstration began when the Vanguard targeted the largest remaining cluster of hegemony ships, nearly 200 vessels that had formed a desperate defensive sphere around Admiral Keth's flagship. These were his best ships, crewed by his most experienced officers equipped with weapons that had conquered star systems. The human ship created a temporal vortex around the entire formation. Not the gentle aging effect they had used before, but something far more sophisticated. The 200 ships found themselves caught in a loop of accelerated cause and effect, where every action they took was immediately undone by its own consequences. Weapons fired and unfired in endless cycles. Shield generators activated and deactivated repeatedly. Crews gave orders that were simultaneously obeyed and ignored as time became unstable around them. The ships were trapped in a nightmare of circular causality, unable to act effectively, because every action was caught in a temporal loop. 2 minutes remaining, Ji Young announced to the galaxy at large, her transmission being picked up by monitoring stations across dozens of star systems. Humanity offers one final opportunity for peaceful resolution. Admiral Keth looked around his bridge at officers who had served with distinction in hundreds of battles. Every face showed the same expression, the hollow-eyed stare of professional soldiers who had encountered something beyond their comprehension. They had prepared for overwhelming force, superior tactics, even impossible odds. None of them had imagined facing an enemy that could rewrite the rules of reality itself. "Sir," his communications officer said quietly, "what are your orders?" For the first time in his career, Supreme Admiral Keth had no answer. How do you give tactical orders against an enemy that exists outside time? How do you plan a battle against foes who can attack you in the past? How do you maintain military discipline when the fundamental laws of physics apparently don't apply to your opponents? The Vanguard hung in space near his flagship, a small and ordinary-looking vessel that had just demonstrated the power to make the greatest fleet in galactic history completely irrelevant. In less than 12 minutes, it had reduced 3,000 warships to scattered debris and panicked survivors. 1 minute remaining, came the final announcement from the human ship. Admiral Keth stared at the countdown display on his command screen as precious seconds ticked away. Around him, his bridge crew waited for orders that he couldn't give. How do you fight the impossible? How do you command a fleet against an enemy that exists outside the laws of physics themselves? 30 seconds remaining. The tactical display showed the scattered remains of what had been the most powerful military force in galactic history. Of his original 3,000 ships, fewer than 800 remained functional. The rest were either destroyed, disabled, or trapped in temporal anomalies that his science officers couldn't even begin to understand. 20 seconds. "Sir," his communications officer said quietly, "the human ship is transmitting surrender terms." The words hit Admiral Keth like a physical blow. In 40 years of military service through 17 successful planetary conquests, he had never heard those words applied to his forces. The Hegemony Empire didn't surrender. They were the conquerors, the ones who offered terms to defeated enemies. 10 seconds. Keth looked one final time at the small human vessel hanging in space near his flagship. The Vanguard appeared no different than it had 14 minutes ago. Unremarkable, almost primitive compared to hegemony technology. Yet in those 14 minutes, it had demonstrated capabilities that rendered everything he understood about warfare meaningless. 5 seconds. "Open a channel to the human ship," Admiral Keth ordered, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. 3 seconds. "Channel open, sir." 1 second. "This is Supreme Admiral Keth of the Hegemony Empire," he said, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was about to do. "I hereby order all hegemony forces to stand down and surrender unconditionally." The silence that followed felt eternal. Across 800 ships, crews that had never known defeat processed orders they had never expected to hear. The Hegemony Empire, master of 17 species across 3 galactic arms, was surrendering to a single human vessel. Captain Dongmin's voice came across the communication channel, calm and professional. "Surrender accepted, Admiral. All hegemony vessels will power down weapons and engines immediately. Prepare to receive humanitarian aid for your casualties." Humanitarian aid. The phrase struck Keth as surreal. These humans had just demonstrated the power to destroy his entire fleet. Yet they were offering medical assistance to wounded hegemony personnel. It was unlike anything in his military experience. "Captain Lee," Admiral Keth said, struggling to maintain his composure, "may I ask what kind of weapons you used against us?" "Temporal manipulation technology," Dongmin replied matter-of-factly. "We call it quantum phase warfare. Your conventional weapons and defenses are designed for 3-dimensional combat. Our systems operate across multiple dimensions of space-time." The explanation confirmed Keth's worst fears. This wasn't just advanced technology. It was a complete revolution in the nature of warfare itself. Every military doctrine, every strategic principle, every tactical manual in hegemony space had become obsolete in the span of 14 minutes. "How long have humans possessed this technology?" Keth asked. "This vessel represents our first successful prototype," Dongmin answered, and Admiral Keth felt his heart skip several beats. "Earth currently has 12 more under construction, with plans for a 100-ship fleet within 5 years. The implications hit the hegemony fleet like a shockwave. One prototype ship had destroyed or disabled over 2,000 vessels. A fleet of 100 such ships could reshape galactic politics completely. The age of hegemony dominance wasn't just ending, it was already over. But Captain Dong Min wasn't finished. "Admiral, we're transmitting technical specifications to your science officers and to monitoring stations throughout the galaxy. The basic principles of temporal shielding technology are being shared with every species that has suffered under hegemony oppression." Admiral Keith's science officer looked up from her displays with an expression of shock. "Sir, they're giving away their defensive technology, the temporal phase calculations, the quantum field generators. They're sharing everything needed to build temporal shields." The revelation was staggering. Humanity wasn't just introducing superior weapons. They were fundamentally changing the balance of power throughout the galaxy. Any species with access to these designs could defend themselves against conventional fleets, no matter how large. "Why?" Admiral Keith asked, genuinely confused. "Why share technology that gives you such an advantage?" "Because the galaxy doesn't need another empire built on fear and overwhelming force," Captain Dongmin replied. "What it needs is a way for every species to defend themselves against conquest and oppression." Chief Engineer Subin's voice joined the transmission as she provided technical details to the stunned galaxy. Temporal phase technology doesn't just create superior weapons, it makes traditional conquest impossible. Ships equipped with quantum phase shields can phase out of normal space-time, making them invulnerable to conventional attack. Any species can now defend themselves against any fleet. The broadcast was being received across dozens of star systems, reaching every species that had monitoring stations capable of intercepting interstellar communications. The 17 species conquered by the hegemony empire were learning that their liberation wasn't just possible. The tools for freedom were being handed to them freely. "The hegemony empire's military doctrine is based on overwhelming force," Dongmin continued. "When every potential victim can defend themselves effectively, that doctrine becomes meaningless. Conquest becomes impossible when the targets can simply phase out of normal space until the attackers give up and go home." Admiral Keth realized that he was witnessing the end of an era. For centuries, the hegemony had ruled through superior technology and massive fleets. Now, in the span of 14 minutes, humanity had made those advantages irrelevant. Not by conquering the empire, but by giving everyone else the tools to resist conquest. "What happens now?" Admiral Keth asked. "Now your empire begins the process of releasing its subject species and withdrawing to your home systems," Dongmin replied. "You've demonstrated that peaceful coexistence isn't your natural choice, so you'll be contained until you learn better. The 17 species you conquered will be offered full technical support to defend themselves." The process was already beginning. Across hegemony space, monitoring stations operated by oppressed species were receiving detailed technical specifications for quantum phase technology. Within months, every conquered world would have the ability to defend itself against hegemony forces. "This is unprecedented," Admiral Keth said, more to himself than to the human captain. "No empire in galactic history has ever given away military technology to their enemies." "We're not your enemies, Admiral," Captain Dongmin replied. "We're your teachers. The lesson is simple. Cooperation works better than conquest. Building works better than destroying. Sharing knowledge creates more prosperity than hoarding it." As the vanguard began moving away from the surrendered hegemony fleet, Admiral Keth realized that he had witnessed something far more significant than a military defeat. Humanity had introduced an entirely new approach to galactic politics. Instead of replacing the hegemony empire with their own empire, they were making all empires impossible. "Sir," his science officer said quietly, "preliminary analysis of the human technical specifications suggests that any species could build basic, temporal shields within 6 months. More advanced systems might take 2 years, which means the hegemony empire has at most 2 years before every species in the galaxy can defend themselves against us," Admiral Keth concluded. The communication channel crackled one final time, as Captain Dongmin delivered humanity's closing message to the galaxy. "This demonstration concludes Earth's introduction to galactic civilization. We look forward to peaceful relationships with all species based on mutual respect and shared prosperity. The age of conquest is over. The age of cooperation begins now. The Vanguard disappeared in a flash of temporal energy, phasing out of normal, space-time as easily as it had phased through hegemony weapons. One moment it was there, the next it was gone, leaving behind only scattered debris and 800 stunned alien crews trying to process what they had experienced. Admiral Keth looked around his bridge one final time as the most powerful military commander in galactic history. Tomorrow he would begin the process of dismantling an empire. Not because he had been conquered, but because conquest itself had become impossible. In 14 minutes, one human prototype ship had changed everything. The galaxy would never be the same.